5 of the most famous photographs in history. Picture this. No, feel it. A single, frozen moment. Light hits film. Time holds its breath. These photographs don't just show history, they interrupt it. They sneak past facts and timelines and grab you by the collar, whispering, "This mattered." Each image below became bigger than the second it was taken. It turned into a symbol, a shorthand for fear, hope, power, rebellion, or quiet courage. 5 clicks of a shutter. 5 echoes that never stopped ringing. Migrant Mother, 1936. In March 1936, photographer Dorothea Lange captured what would become the most recognizable image of the Great Depression. Officially titled Migrant Mother, Nipomo, California, the photograph shows a 32-year-old farm worker and mother of 7, later identified as Florence Owens Thompson. Her face is tense and distant, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the camera, as if she is calculating a future with no clear answers. An infant rests in her lap, while 2 older children press their faces into her shoulders, turning away from the world and the lens. At the time the photograph was published, Thompson's identity remained anonymous. Lange had taken the image while working for the Farm Security Administration, a federal program created to document and assist farm workers displaced by the Dust Bowl. Years later, Lange recalled being drawn to the woman as if by a magnet. Thompson told her they had been surviving on frozen vegetables and birds the children managed to catch. Lange took several exposures in just a few minutes and then moved on, unaware she had created an icon. Decades later, the story behind the image unraveled. In 1978, a reporter from the Modesto Bee tracked Thompson down and confirmed her identity. Thompson revealed she viewed the photograph as a curse rather than a blessing. She never received compensation, and the image followed her for the rest of her life without easing her poverty. Further details complicated the narrative even more. She was not a Dust Bowl migrant in the way the public imagined, but a woman of Native American, Cherokee, heritage displaced from Oklahoma. The camp itself had been temporary, a brief stop while the family's car was being repaired nearby. Near the end of Thompson's life, donations poured in to help cover medical expenses, along with letters from strangers who said her image gave them strength during hard times. Those gestures softened the family's view of the photograph, allowing it to transform from a symbol of loss into one of resilience and quiet endurance. Raising the Flag on Iwo Jima, 1945. Joe Rosenthal was a photographer for the Associated Press during World War II, whose legacy was defined by the Pulitzer Prize-winning photo Raising the Flag on Iwo Jima. Rosenthal captured the iconic event on February 23, 1945, on the small Japanese island of Iwo Jima, roughly 750 miles south of Tokyo in the Pacific Ocean. The picture depicts 6 men triumphantly raising an American flag and commemorates an important military victory, though there's a good deal more to the story. The island of Iwo Jima was a strategic stronghold occupied by the Japanese. On February 19th, 3 U.S. Marine divisions landed on Iwo Jima and began a harrowing multi-day battle with Japanese forces. On February 23rd, Americans took control of Mount Suribachi, a geographic landmark on the southern end of the island. In celebration of their conquest, troops raised up an American flag, though not the flag seen in the famous image. It was actually a smaller flag, captured by Sergeant Lewis R. Lowry in a lesser-known photograph. Hours later, troops were ordered to replace the first flag with a larger American flag that could be seen more easily from a far distance. This caught the attention of Rosenthal, who heard the plan from a nearby radio man. Rosenthal brought his camera to the mountain, where he photographed 6 men, 5 Marines and 1 Navy corpsman, raising the larger flag in what has since become an iconic image. Tragically, it took another month for American forces to take the entire island of Iwo Jima, during which 3 of those men were killed: Sergeant Michael Strank, Corporal Harlan Block, and Private First Class Franklin Sousley. The 3 others who survived the battle and the war were Corporals Harold Keller, Harold Schultz, and 22-year-old Ira Hayes, a soldier of Pima Indian descent who went on to meet President Harry Truman at the White House. Guerriero Heroico, 1960. In March 1960, Cuban photographer Alberto Corda took a photograph that would become one of the most reproduced images in history. The subject was Che Guevara, captured during a memorial service in Havana for victims of a deadly explosion at the harbor. The photograph was titled Guerriero Heroico, meaning heroic guerrilla fighter. At the time, the image received little attention. It showed Guevara staring into the distance, jaw clenched, hair unruly, his expression a mix of defiance and resolve. Years later, after Guevara's execution in Bolivia in 1967, the photograph resurfaced and spread rapidly across the world. It appeared on posters, banners, T-shirts and murals, turning Guevara into a global symbol of rebellion and revolution. The irony of the photograph's legacy is hard to miss. Guevara, a committed Marxist who opposed capitalism, became a commercial icon, sold endlessly for profit. The image flattened a complicated and controversial figure into a simple myth, hero to some, villain to others. What remained constant was the power of the stare, frozen in time, daring viewers to take a side. Elvis meets Nixon, 1970. On December 21, 1970, one of the strangest meetings in American history took place inside the White House. Rock and roll icon Elvis Presley met with President Richard Nixon, and the resulting photograph captured a surreal collision between pop culture and political power. Elvis arrived in Washington unannounced, carrying a handwritten letter in which he asked to become a federal agent at large. He claimed he wanted to help combat drug use and counterculture movements, despite his own well-documented struggles with prescription medications. Nixon, who privately disliked rock music and what it represented, agreed to meet him anyway. The image of the two men shaking hands quickly became legendary. Elvis wore a flamboyant outfit, complete with a large belt buckle, while Nixon appeared stiff and formal by comparison. Today, the photograph is the most requested image from the National Archives. It endures not because it changed policy, but because it revealed something deeply American. Fame can open doors that power alone sometimes cannot. Tank Man, 1989. In June 1989, in the aftermath of the Chinese government's violent crackdown on pro-democracy protests, an unidentified man stepped into the path of a column of tanks near Tiananmen Square. Several photographers captured the moment from a distance. The image would come to be known simply as Tank Man. The photograph shows a lone figure standing still, holding what appear to be grocery bags as massive tanks loom over him. When the lead tank attempts to move around him, the man shifts to block its path again. For a brief moment, overwhelming military power is forced to stop and wait. To this day, the identity and fate of Tank Man remain unknown. In China, the image is heavily censored and rarely discussed. Elsewhere, it has become one of the most enduring symbols of individual resistance against authoritarian power. No slogans, no weapons, just a man, a pause, and a question that history never answered. These photographs remind us that history doesn't always announce itself with speeches or signatures. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through a worried mother's gaze, a group of soldiers straining together, a revolutionary caught mid-thought, a rock star shaking hands with power, or a man who refused to step aside. Each image froze a moment no one could fully understand at the time, and yet, decades later, we still feel their weight. The people inside these frames did not set out to become symbols. They were simply living inside a moment that history refused to let go. And that may be the real power of photography. It doesn't just show us what happened. It asks us to remember that ordinary people, standing in the right or wrong place at the right time, can shape how the world remembers itself.